Hi people, it's Archivist here, and today I'm going to be talking about Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled. This game has caught me completely off guard. I did enjoy the Insane trilogy, and I enjoyed Spyro Reignited, and so I thought that, hey, I might as well give this game a go. Even though, initially, I thought it just looks like another version of Mario Kart, and, well, I really like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, so I don't see how this game can top it. But how wrong I was. And let me explain exactly how I came to the realization that this is the best kart racer you can play today. But also a bit of context, right? So I never played the original Crash Team Racing that came out on the PlayStation 1 back in 1999. Wow, what a long time ago. In fact, I didn't play any of these original PlayStation 1 games that are being remade. So to me, these aren't remakes, these are just new fun games, which is fantastic. So I suppose I come at this from this perspective not as someone who is feeling nostalgic for the original Crash Team Racing. Although I will say I feel nostalgic for the Crash franchise generally, as I did play some of the PlayStation 2 titles. But I am just judging this game on its own merits. I don't care that this game is being faithful or accurate to the original rendition. I just care what is the quality of this game in 2019, and it is fantastic. And I think the reason that this kart racer works so well, I think it's two reasons. The control that you have over your kart is incredibly tight and very much down to your own abilities, and also the challenge in this game. It is not just simply a hard game. It is a game that can be very accessible on the easiest difficulties if you just want to get into the game and train. The medium difficulty is no walk in the park. You do have to get used to the tracks and you do have to understand the mechanics of the game, but it is doable. And then the hard variant of this game, when you play against the AI on hard, is absolutely brutal, which is fantastic because that's what you want. Easy is actually pretty easy, medium, yep, decent challenge, and then hard is, in every sense of the word, hard. So they've really nailed the different difficulty levels in my opinion, and that is worth so much more praise than the game just being too easy for everyone, which I think Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is on the AI. I think it just never gets difficult. But also, equally, it's not inaccessible where you have to be an absolute pro just to finish one race. So let's just go through what this game offers as well. You've got an adventure mode where you go through a bit of a hub and you go to each of the different races in the original Crash Team Racing. And so the overall aim of adventure mode is to defeat this villain named Nitrous Oxide, who claims to be the fastest racer in the galaxy, and if you don't race him then he's going to turn the planet into a parking lot. So you go through each of the different races from the original Crash Team Racing, and you need to win them, which is good. You actually can't just come second or third best endeavours, you have to win every single track, so you're forced to understand how the tracks are. You can't just wing it all the way through. In fact, I remember the first time I played the first track on this, Crash Cove, I did lose quite a few times, and I thought, wait a second. And this was, by the way, is on the medium difficulty. But yeah, I just thought, wait, this isn't a walk in the park. I actually have to learn this game. And you go through all these different levels, and then you face Nitrous Oxide. There are a few boss battles along the way, and the boss battles take the form of a fast racer who will continuously throw back hazardous projectiles. This can get quite infuriating, so the tactic here is to get ahead of the boss and stay ahead of the boss, because if you go behind some of them, you're just getting battered by bombs or potions or whatever. So I should talk about the standout mechanic of this game. Alongside items that you can use to throw at your opponent or defend yourself, there is the boosting mechanic. Now, in the majority of kart races, the way you boost is to go into a drift, and the longer you hold that drift, the bigger your boost will be when you release the drift, right? So it encourages you just to hold your drift as long as you possibly can and maintain control. Not too bad. But in this game, it goes a step further, where you have to go into the drift, and as you're drifting, you will see a gauge begin to fill up. You need to manually trigger this gauge just as it's going to the very end of its limit, and that will give you a boost. If you wait too long, it will fail and you won't get a boost. If you go too early, it will also fail. If you go a bit prematurely, then it will be a small boost, but there's this sweet spot where you will get the optimal amount of boost. So it becomes a bit of a rhythm where you go into your drift and then need to know the exact right time to boost. And then within the same drift, you can boost 3 times. So that you need to get this timing down so that you can boost, not lose control, and just drift around corners with a real finesse. And initially it does present a bit of a learning curve where you'll be missing the prompt, or you'll just get a bit confused where you're trying to control the car and boost simultaneously. But trust me, once you've done a few races, it just becomes muscle memory. And it gets to the point where you're not really even looking at the gauge anymore. You're just knowing instinctively that you have to wait this long in between pressing the button. And that's how you learn the nuance of boosting in Crash Team Racing. And that in and of itself is enough to present a much higher skill ceiling than regular kart races, because it means that it's not just enough to go around the track and not bump into the walls or fly off the sides. You need to be going around the track and drifting as much as possible, sometimes just constantly, while also boosting at just the right time every time as well. So a novice may approach it by simply just trying to drive around the track. They'll make the best use of the items they can get, but if you want to get good at the game, you need to learn how you can angle yourself so you can be pretty much perma-drifting in this game. Some tracks don't allow for this. They'll have some corners that are just too tight for you to maintain a drift around, even for the characters where they're very good at doing tight turns. But then there are other tracks where you can just boost around the entire circuit, and that is a lot of fun. And sometimes it can be a track that does just appear to be very simple, but because the roads are very wide, it allows for that constant boosting, and that in and of itself presents a very decent challenge. I suppose, though, when you do couple this with the item boxes, similar to, again, Mario Kart, it can feel a little bit undermining, where there's this very obvious direction towards skill, but at the same time you have items where you can fire out this warp ball that will go and just automatically hit the person in first place, because it feels like it's just doesn't matter if you're doing really well, the game will find a way to bring you back. Or it can be a case where some person might be really lucky and they keep getting missiles, so they can just keep hitting the person in front of them, whereas another person might just get something like regular potions, which are quite hard to use offensively, or even defensively sometimes. And there is a little bit of element of skill around the items as well, I suppose, because you can collect Wumpa Fruit, and when you get to 10, which is the cap, it will automatically boost all of your weapons, so they do a bit more damage, they become a bit more effective, which creates a game of you sometimes have to wonder, do I want to go and get the item box immediately because I really want to get something, or do I want to go and get some Wumpa Fruit, which means I don't get anything yet, but when I do get the next item box, it will be better. Plus, I think there is a little bit of a speed boost to having 10 Wumpa Fruit as well. So it creates this dichotomy of, do I go for the item straight away, or do I get some Wumpa Fruit? But ultimately, there is a randomizer on the items, and therefore there just is an element of luck to it. There have been times where I have been in second place, and then I've got the invincibility mask, which is a lot like the star power in Mario Kart, and it's just because of that I've come first. And I felt a bit like, well, that wasn't really me being particularly good, it's just because I got lucky. But the thing is, I think you do need at least some element of randomness in these kart races, because that is what sort of distinguishes one race from the other. Because if you didn't have that, then we might as well just be doing time trials all day long, right? By the way, there are also time trials in this game, and I never usually do time trials or time attack, whatever it gets called in its given game, but the reason I decided to do it here was because there's a character that you can only unlock by doing all of the tracks in time trial and beating their ghost data. And what I found to be quite interesting about this challenge is that this character called Entropy is really, really hard to beat because he goes around the track so quickly. and it took me a long time to be able to unlock him. Number one, just because it does take a while to go through all of the tracks. You have to do them at least twice, once to get the right to face him and then to actually beat him. But also the fact that I had to learn to, I don't want to say master, because there is an even higher level of mastery you can get, but at least get quite good at the tracks to get them. So the time trials are a great part of this game because they really exhibit the more nuanced mechanics. Plus, if you do get good at them, you've got this character entropy as your reward for doing that. And unlocks in general are a big part of this game as well. So there are multiple characters you can unlock. Some you unlock by doing the adventure mode. Beating bosses, for example, will get you that boss. There's some characters like Fake Crash where you have to do this crystal grab mini-game within the adventure mode in order to unlock him. As I mentioned before, you have Entropy, which I think is the best example of an unlock because that represents a very significant milestone. And then you've also got some characters that you get in this area called the Pit Stop. So as you win races, provided you are connected to the internet, which is quite divisive for some people because we don't want to take it for granted that everyone constantly has that connection. But so long as you have a connection to the internet, even if you are, funnily enough, doing a single player mode, you will get Wampa coins. And Wampa coins allow you to spend them in the pit stop, which, when you look at it, looks a hell of a lot like a microtransaction store. However, as of me making this video, it is currently not a microtransaction store. It is simply a store that you can use in-game currency to get cosmetics. So that's okay. And some characters are actually locked in here. They're usually 1,500 Wampa coins. That could, of course, change as time goes on. So there are some characters there. I believe a lot of them were from a PlayStation 2 title called Crash Nitro Kart, I think. So characters like Crunch. Crunch was a great character for me to unlock because I played Wrath of Cortex back in the day, and Crunch was the main villain. I thought it was quite a cool character, so I really liked the fact you could unlock Crunch in this game. And there are also these characters you unlock in this Grand Prix. So the Grand Prix is something that I can talk about having waited to do this review, where intermittently you'll have these points in time on a calendar where you can do these random challenges. Maybe it's win a race, look in the pit stop, complete a time trial, and then you get these nitro points. And as you get these nitro points, you will unlock even more cosmetic things. And if you get to a certain milestone, you can unlock a particular character. So, for example, for this first Grand Prix, you have a character, Tawna, who was the basically the damsel in distress from the original Crash game. But also you've got other characters that you can get in the pit stop. And this is quite encouraging because it implies that even though there are already so many characters in the game with so many different skin variants as well, so you can customize different characters, it implies that there will be even more to come. In fact, the developers have already teased that Spyro will be in the game, which is quite exciting. But also, I suppose I do have a very strong suspicion that we will eventually see microtransactions in the game because the store is very much set up and primed for that to happen. But then I took a little bit of a backstep. So I'm obviously no lover of microtransactions, but at the same time, think about it this way. As of right now, this moment in time, do we have enough characters and enough content to justify the price of admission for this game, which, by the way, is already not a full price game? And I believe the answer to that question is, without doubt, yes. The money you pay for this game absolutely syncs up with the amount of content and the amount of characters that you can just get by playing the game. So that is truth. So if they have to introduce cosmetic microtransactions in order to fund the inclusion of other characters in the future, which I do hope you can still unlock by grinding if you want to, I suppose that is not necessarily a terrible situation, because then I suppose just imagine it in two different branches. Either microtransactions are never added to the game and therefore we don't get any additional characters, or microtransactions are added to the game, and if people want to get these additional characters, they can get them. So I suppose on one of the paths, you at least get the new characters, but if they never introduce anything, well, we just don't gain anything and nothing changes, right? I suppose, of course, if they did something really awful, like made it so that they introduced a character with perfect stats, so that that character would always win online, and made it so that you had to pay for this character or grind for days and days to get it, that would be wrong. But if they keep it within cosmetics, given the value proposition that already exists, I would not necessarily hate that. But it would be interesting to hear other people's opinions. I know a lot of people just despise the idea. Some people have a bit of a, well, it depends on the implementation, and that's sort of where I sit. It depends on the implementation. Pay to win will never ever be acceptable, but there are ways with cosmetics you can make it work. But again, you know, I'm talking about a hypothetical, right? I do suspect it's going that way, but that is not currently how it is. And maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I think I suspect eventually it will be, especially if you look at what happened with Black Ops 4. So, what else is there? So online, I really like online in kart races because I feel it gives them a lot more replay value, because you can't get any more dynamic than other players. And it's a great place to take those skills that you've learned from playing in the offline modes and taking them into the online arena. You can also show off the various characters you've unlocked and the various skins for those characters you've unlocked, which is great. I mean, you know, it's one thing to unlock characters, but if you can never really show them to anyone, it's a bit like a bit of personal pride, but you can't really ever show it off. So the online arena is very much appreciated. I also haven't really talked about it, but there is a battle mode in this game, so this can be things like capture the flag, or ones where you have to hit people with various items. Also crystal grab. I don't particularly care for these. I mean, I'm sure there are people out there who like this, but I just find it a bit clunky to drive around in these carts where the mechanics are clearly designed for speed as priority, but you have to keep slowing down and awkwardly turning. I don't find it much fun beyond a little bit of distraction, but if you like that kind of thing, it's here. And there are plenty of tracks as well. It's not just like a small side thing. There are actually quite a few tracks with these additional modes in them, which is really quite amazing. Again, adding to the fantastic value proposition you have here. Oh, another thing, this is an interesting point. So this game runs somewhat controversially on all platforms, given that the PC release doesn't exist yet. Maybe there will be, maybe there won't, but at the moment on all consoles it's a 30 FPS experience. Bit strange, because you would expect a kart racing game where speed is key to have 60 frames per second, and of course it must be possible because this is based on a PS1 game, so if they wanted to make it 60 frames per second, all they had to do was not upgrade the graphics as much, right? It was a conscious choice they made. And at first I thought this was going to really put me off, because I do love 60 FPS gaming, right? Just do. And I started playing it, and initially, yes, it was noticeable. I was like, okay, it's 30 frames per second, fine. And by the way, I was playing it on the PlayStation 4 Pro. But I did think, but on the flip side, these graphics are really nice. The art style is fantastic, and the technical quality is also great. You've got ambient occlusion. It looks really, really nice. Some of the tracks just absolutely beautiful to behold. There's no getting away from that. So I started playing, and I have to admit that because the frame rate is so consistent, again, I'm judging by the PS4 Pro, I didn't really notice it after a while, it has to be said. And the motion blur implementation in this game is possibly the best I think we've ever seen. Motion blur is something that can be done right, and then it can be done wrong. I think an example where it was perhaps a bit too strong, for example, was the Reignited trilogy, where it actually detracted from the experience. But here, it's implemented in such a way that I feel that it does add a little bit of fluidity to the overall motion, which I quite like. And so, with that in mind, considering they've taken every step to make the 30 FPS experience the best 30 FPS they can make it, I don't begrudge the developers too much for making the choice, particularly as that trade-off has allowed them to get such fantastic visuals on the consoles. And I suppose it's quite interesting as well that this means that the Switch version of the game is also the same frame rate as the higher level consoles. Admittedly, of course, the visuals have to be downgraded. But having played it on the Switch as well, I was surprised at how good the game looked in comparison to the PS4 Pro of all things. And the reason I decided to get both versions was, well, I got the PS4 Pro version at first, and I just really, really liked it. And I liked it so much that I wanted to be able to play it on the go, so I got it on the Switch. And yeah, I was just so impressed at how well the game translated over. So if you are a Switch fan, do not worry. Although it is slightly less impressive visually, the core, the essence of the experience, if you will, is all intact here, which is great, because I remember back when handheld games were always, or most of the time, heavily compromised versions of their console counterparts. But now we're getting to the point that, other than the visuals, they are pretty much the same experience, which I really like. So, talked about the difficulty, the challenge, the nuance of the boosting mechanic, the plethora of characters, the wonderful tracks, the amazing visuals, and I just have to say that this is a great game. I don't get as much time as I used to talk about games and review games anymore. So when I do, I tend to choose games that I really enjoy. For example, I talked about Sekiro earlier in the year. But this game has just completely shocked me at how much I've enjoyed it. It's got this addictive nature with how you're encouraged to master the tracks, to master the boosting mechanics, to understand every facet of the experience. And if you do that, then you can become incredibly good at the game. The skill ceiling is stratospheric. I suppose, the offset of that is if you do choose to go online, as I have found many times before, you'll notice that there are some absolute god tier players online, and it can get to the point where they finish the race so far ahead of everyone else that the race ends before anyone else can beat it. But it just, it can be frustrating in a moment. But on the other hand, it's also a case of it gives you some inspiration to see what is possible if you get good enough at the game, and I really like that. Yes, there are some moments of frustration with items. I think the worst thing is if you're coming up to a boost ramp, and you get hit by a missile, and then you end up bouncing off the side of the stage and you get reset, so you have to do the jump again. Oh, that is rough when that happens, and you will be frustrated. And in moments like that, it does feel a bit more similar to the likes of Mario Kart, where that game is very much based around the item play and just constantly knocking your opponents off guard. And I suppose I do, to some extent, wish that items were toned down online. I've heard some people talk about a pro mode where you go online and you have no items at all. I understand the appeal of this, but the thing is, that would be basically a time trial mode, because there would just be no interaction between players other than seeing them on the track. So I feel like the game would get a bit dry if they did that. But I suppose there's no harm in just exploring the idea. So I can't think of too much more to say than that. I'm not someone who can make endless comparisons to the original, because again, I haven't played it. I am just enjoying this game based on its own merits, its own strengths. I can't recommend it enough, regardless of platform. I mean, I haven't played it on the Xbox One, but I'm assuming it's the same basic experience, right, as the PlayStation 4 version. The Switch version seems great. I would like a PC version so that there's the option with sufficient graphical power to ramp up to 60 FPS, but this game is great. It is just absolutely fantastic, and I really look forward to seeing what the developers continue to add to this game. So if you have any thoughts yourself on Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled, or you want to ask me any questions, something I haven't mentioned in here. I know some people, for example, are quite frustrated with the pit stop and the fact that certain characters don't seem to be unlockable at the moment without an online connection, so there are things like that, but I suppose on the whole, in your typical setup, the game is genuinely very good. As always, people, thanks very much for watching, and see you next time.